The blood trail was unmistakable against the pale dust of the Missouri road, and Quinn Forrester knew before he even dismounted that whoever had left, it was either dead or close enough to make no difference. The summer sun of 1878 beat down mercilessly on the winding trail that connected Wyatt to the larger towns eastward, and the heat shimmered off the ground in waves that made the distant trees look like they were dancing. He had been riding for 2 days straight, heading back to his ranch after delivering a herd of cattle to Kansas City, and his body ached with the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from too many nights sleeping on hard ground. But when he saw that blood, dark and glistening on the dirt, every instinct in him sharpened to a point. Quinn urged his horse forward, following the crimson droplets that led off the main road and into a sparse grove of cottonwoods. His hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip, though he left it holstered. The blood was fresh, maybe an hour old at most, and the drag marks alongside it told him whoever was bleeding had been crawling. He rounded a thick tree trunk and stopped short. She was lying on her side, one arm stretched out ahead of her as if she had been trying to pull herself forward even as consciousness slipped away. Her dress, once probably a respectable traveling outfit in dark blue calico, was torn and soaked with blood along her left side and shoulder. Dark hair had come loose from its pins and spread across the ground like spilled ink. Her face was turned away from him, but he could see the shallow rise and fall of her ribs. Barely breathing but alive, Quinn was off his horse in an instant, dropping to his knees beside her. He touched her shoulder gently, and she made a small sound, something between a gasp and a moan, but did not open her eyes. The wound on her shoulder looked like a bullet had grazed her, tearing through fabric and flesh but missing anything vital. The blood loss was the real danger now. He had seen men die from wounds half as serious simply because they bled out before anyone could help them. "Easy now," he said quietly, though he did not know if she could hear him. "I am going to help you." He ran back to his horse and grabbed his saddlebag, pulling out the cleanest shirt he had and a flask of whiskey he kept for emergencies. His hands worked quickly, tearing the shirt into strips. He poured whiskey over the wound, and this time she did cry out, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. They were a striking green, vivid even in her weakened state, and they fixed on his face with an expression that was half fear, half desperate hope. "Who?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "My name is Quinn Forrester," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady as he pressed a folded strip of fabric against her shoulder to slow the bleeding. "You are safe now. I am not going to hurt you." Her eyes searched his face for a long moment, and then she seemed to relax slightly, her body going slack again. They tried to." "Do not talk right now," Quinn said firmly. "Save your strength. We need to stop this bleeding." He worked with practiced efficiency, wrapping the makeshift bandages around her shoulder and torso as best he could without moving her too much. The bullet had taken a chunk out of her upper arm and grazed along her collarbone, leaving an ugly furrow that would scar but would heal if she survived the next few hours. He had learned field medicine during the war, knowledge he wished he had never needed but was grateful for now. When the bandages were secure and the bleeding had slowed to a seep rather than a flow, he sat back on his heels and assessed her more carefully. She was young, probably not more than 22 or 23, with delicate features and hands that showed she had known hard work. Her nails were broken and there were older scars on her palms. A working woman then, not some pampered city lady. Her dress, though torn and bloody, had been mended several times with careful stitches. She wore no wedding ring. Quinn looked around the grove, searching for any sign of what had happened to her. He found it quickly enough. There were tracks in the dirt, boot prints from at least 3 men, and the churned earth suggested there had been a struggle. Farther back, half hidden in the brush, he found a small carpet bag with its contents scattered. A few dresses, a Bible, a tintype photograph of a middle-aged couple who might have been her parents. No money, no jewelry. Robbery then, or attempted robbery. He gathered what he could and stuffed it back into the bag. When he returned to her side, her eyes were open again, watching him with a wary intensity that made him keep his movements slow and non-threatening. "I found your bag," he said, showing it to her. "Looks like whoever did this took anything valuable, but I saved what was left." "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was stronger now, though still weak. I thought I was going to die out here." "Not if I can help it," Quinn said. He offered her the water canteen, and she drank gratefully, though she winced with every movement. "What is your name?" "Willa Langston," she said. "I was traveling to Wyatt to take a teaching position at the schoolhouse. 3 men stopped the coach about 5 miles back. They robbed everyone and shot the driver when he tried to fight back. I ran when they started looking at me the wrong way." Quinn felt a cold anger settle in his gut. He had seen too much of this during his years on the frontier, men who thought they could take whatever they wanted from those weaker than themselves. The other passengers, an older couple. The men let them go after they took their money, but they followed me when I ran into the trees. Her voice broke slightly. "One of them shot me. I thought they would finish it, but I heard a posse in the distance, gunshots, and they ran off. I tried to get back to the road, but I could not make it very far." "You made it far enough," Quinn said. "If you had stayed where you fell, I would not have found you." He studied the angle of the sun and calculated distances in his head. "We are about 10 miles from Wyatt. My ranch is closer, maybe 6 miles west. I can get you there faster, and you need rest and proper doctoring before we try for town." Willa looked uncertain, and he could not blame her. She had just been attacked by strange men, and here was another stranger offering to take her to his isolated ranch. But she was also pragmatic enough to know she had little choice. "Will there be? Is there a wife there? Other people?" "No wife," Quinn said quietly. "Just me and my ranch hand, a fellow named Pete who is about 60 years old and harmless as a kitten. But I give you my word, Miss Langston, I will not harm you. I will send Pete to fetch the doctor from Wyatt as soon as we arrive." She studied his face for a long moment, and whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slightly. "All right. I do not think I have much choice anyway." Quinn nodded and stood, then carefully scooped her up in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and she bit back a cry of pain as the movement jarred her injuries. "I am sorry," he said. "This is going to hurt, but we need to get you on my horse." Getting her onto the saddle was an ordeal that left them both sweating and her white-faced with pain, but they managed it. Quinn mounted behind her, keeping one arm around her waist to hold her steady against his chest. She sagged against him, too weak to protest the intimacy of the position, and he could feel the heat of fever starting to build in her body. Infection was setting in faster than he had hoped. They needed to move quickly. The ride to his ranch took 2 hours that felt like 2 days. Willa drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mumbling things he could not quite hear, other times going so still he had to check that she was still breathing. He kept up a steady stream of quiet talk, telling her about the ranch, about the country they were passing through, about anything he could think of to keep her tethered to the waking world. When they finally crested the rise that overlooked his property, he felt a wave of relief. The Forrester ranch was not much to look at, just a sturdy cabin he had built himself, a barn, a corral, and about 200 acres of decent grazing land. But it was his, earned with his own sweat and determination after the war had ended and left him with nothing but the clothes on his back and a desire to start over somewhere new. He had chosen Missouri because it was far enough from the battlefields of his past, but still had good land for cattle. It had been a hard 10 years, but he had made something of himself here. Pete came out of the barn as Quinn rode up, his weathered face creasing with concern when he saw the woman in Quinn's arms. "Good Lord, boss, what happened?" "She was attacked on the road," Quinn said tersely, dismounting carefully and lifting Willa down. "Get the bed ready in the cabin and then ride hard for Wyatt. Fetch Dr. Morrison and tell him it is urgent. Gunshot wound, infection setting in." Pete moved with surprising speed for a man his age, and within minutes, Willa was laid out on Quinn's own bed, the only proper bed in the cabin, while Pete thundered off toward town on Quinn's fastest horse. Quinn built up the fire and set water to boil, then gathered the medical supplies he kept on hand. The war had taught him to always be prepared for injuries. He worked through the evening and into the night, changing her bandages, cleaning the wound as best he could, and trying to get water and a little broth down her throat when she was conscious enough to swallow. The fever climbed higher as darkness fell, and she began to talk in her delirium, fragments of sentences that gave him glimpses into her life. She spoke of her parents, both dead from cholera 2 years past. She spoke of the teaching position that had been her hope for a new start, away from the city where she had been working in a textile mill. She spoke of loneliness and fear and determination. Quinn found himself talking back to her, keeping up a one-sided conversation, because the silence felt too much like a death watch. He told her about growing up in Tennessee, about fighting in a war he had not fully understood, about coming west with nothing and building this ranch from dirt and determination. He told her things he had never told anyone, secrets and sorrows he had kept locked away for years. Maybe it was because she was not really listening, or maybe it was because in her fevered state she reminded him of something pure and worth protecting. The doctor arrived near midnight, riding in with Pete and a black bag that smelled of carbolic acid and other sharp medicinal scents. Dr. Morrison was a thin, precise man in his 50s who had served as a battlefield surgeon and knew his business. He examined Willa thoroughly, cleaned and rebandaged her wounds with proper supplies, and gave her a draught of laudanum to ease the pain and help her rest. "She is lucky you found her when you did," Morrison said, washing his hands in the basin Quinn provided. "Another hour or two and the infection would have been too far gone. As it is, she has a fighting chance. Keep the wound clean, change the bandages twice a day, and make sure she drinks plenty of fluids. The fever should break in a day or two if all goes well." "And if it does not?" Quinn asked. Morrison gave him a level look. "Then you had better make peace with whatever God you believe in, because there will not be much I can do. But I think she will pull through. She seems like a strong one." After the doctor left, Quinn pulled a chair up beside the bed and settled in for the night. Pete offered to take a turn watching her, but Quinn waved him off. He could not explain the feeling that had taken hold of him, the certainty that he needed to be there when she woke up, needed to be the face she saw, so she would know she was safe. So he sat in the flickering firelight and watched her breathe, and somewhere in the small hours of the morning, he admitted to himself that something had shifted inside him the moment he had seen her lying broken on that trail. The fever broke on the 3rd day, in the gray light just before dawn. Quinn had dozed off in his chair, his head tilted back against the wall, when he felt someone watching him. He opened his eyes to find Willa awake and lucid, those green eyes fixed on his face with an expression he could not quite read. "You stayed," she said softly. "I did," Quinn replied, sitting up and wincing as his back protested the position he had been sleeping in. "How do you feel?" "Like I was shot and left to die," she said with a faint smile. "But better than I did. Thank you, the doctor said you saved my life." "The doctor saved your life," Quinn corrected. "I just found you. You found me, you bandaged me, you brought me here, and you have been sitting in that chair for 3 days according to that older gentleman who has been bringing in food and fresh water. Pete, I think he said his name was." She shifted slightly on the bed, trying to sit up, and Quinn moved quickly to help her, propping pillows behind her back. "So yes, you saved my life." Quinn felt heat rise in his face, unaccustomed to such direct gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Willa said firmly. "They would not have. I have learned that the hard way." She looked around the cabin, taking in the simple but well-made furniture, the neat stacks of books on a shelf near the fireplace, the clean, swept floor. "This is your home." "It is, not much, but it is mine." He poured her a cup of water from the pitcher on the bedside table and handed it to her. "You should rest more. You are not recovered yet." "I have been resting for 3 days," Willa said, but she drank the water gratefully. "What I need is to know what happens next. I was supposed to report to the schoolhouse in Wyatt 5 days ago. They probably think I am dead or have changed my mind, and I have no money to pay you or the doctor for your trouble." "The doctor has been paid," Quinn said, "and you do not owe me anything. As for the school, Pete rode into town yesterday and explained what happened. The schoolmaster said the position would be held for you until you recovered." He hesitated, then added, "There is no rush. You are welcome to stay here as long as you need to heal." Willa looked at him with those penetrating green eyes, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see right through him. "You are a kind man, Mr. Forrester. That is a rare thing." Over the next 2 weeks, Willa grew stronger. The wound healed cleanly, leaving a scar that would fade to a thin white line over time. She graduated from the bed to a chair by the fireplace, and then to walking around the cabin with Quinn or Pete hovering nearby in case she grew dizzy. She insisted on helping with small tasks despite their protests, mending their clothes and preparing simple meals. Quinn found himself looking forward to the evenings when the work was done and they would sit by the fire and talk. He learned that she was 23 years old, the daughter of schoolteachers who had died when the cholera swept through St. Louis. She had worked in the mills for a year and a half after their death, saving every penny until she saw the advertisement for a teaching position in Wyatt. She was well-read and sharp-witted, with opinions on everything from politics to literature that she was not afraid to share. She made him laugh with her dry observations about human nature, and she listened with genuine interest when he talked about ranching and cattle and the land he loved. Quinn was 31, old enough to have seen and done more than he cared to remember, and he had long since accepted that he would probably live out his days alone. He had tried courting a few times over the years, but it had never felt right. The women in town were nice enough, but there had been no spark, no connection that made him think of forever. With Willa, it was different. She challenged him, made him think, made him want to be better than he was. And the way she looked at him sometimes, with warmth and something that might be the beginning of affection, made his heart do strange things in his chest. One evening, about 3 weeks after he had found her, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Willa had been quiet for a while, and Quinn could tell something was on her mind. "I should go into town tomorrow," she said finally. "I am well enough now, and I have imposed on your hospitality long enough. The school needs a teacher." Quinn felt something tighten in his chest. He had known this was coming, but that did not make it any easier. "You have not imposed, you have been good company." "Still," Willa said, "it is time." You have your ranch to run, and I have a job to do." She paused, then added quietly, "Unless you do not want me to go." The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Quinn knew this was a moment that mattered, one of those instants where a life could pivot in an entirely new direction. He could let her go, watch her ride off to town and start her new life, and things would go back to how they had been before. Safe, solitary, empty, or he could be honest. "I do not want you to go," he said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. "These past weeks, having you here, it has made me realize how lonely I have been. I know I do not have any right to ask you to stay, and I know we have not known each other long, but Willa, I care about you. More than I probably should." Willa turned to look at him, and there were tears shining in her eyes. "I care about you too. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it is just gratitude or relief at being alive, but it is more than that. When I think about leaving, about not seeing you every day, it feels like losing something precious I only just found." Quinn reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her smaller ones. "Then stay. Not as a guest, not as someone recovering from injury. Stay because you want to. Let me court you properly. Let me show you what kind of man I can be when I have something worth being good for." "Quinn," she whispered, and the way she said his name made his heart race. "Are you sure? You barely know me." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know you are brave and smart and kind. I know you make me laugh and make me think. I know that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. That is enough for me. The rest we can figure out together." She was quiet for a long moment, and Quinn held his breath, terrified he had pushed too hard, asked for too much. Then she smiled, that beautiful smile that lit up her whole face, and squeezed his hand. "All right," she said. "I will stay. We will figure it out together." Quinn felt like he could breathe again, like the world had suddenly opened up into something bigger and brighter than it had been before. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture of respect and promise. "I will make you happy," he said. "I swear I will try every day to make you happy." "You already do," Willa said softly. The next morning, Quinn hitched up the wagon and drove Willa into Wyatt. The town was small but prosperous, with a main street lined with shops and businesses, a church with a white steeple, and a schoolhouse at the far end near a creek. The schoolmaster, a portly man named Hiram Tucker, greeted Willa with obvious relief. "Miss Langston. We had heard what happened, of course, terrible business. I am so glad you recovered. The children have been running wild with only substitute teachers." He eyed Quinn with curious speculation. "And this is the gentleman who rescued you, Quinn Forrester," Quinn said, shaking the man's hand. "I have a ranch about 6 miles west of here." "Ah, yes, I know of you. You keep to yourself mostly, but I have heard you are an honest man and a hard worker." Tucker turned back to Willa. "Well, Miss Langston, if you are ready, I can show you the schoolhouse and the boarding room we have prepared for you. It is not much, but it is clean and comfortable." Willa glanced at Quinn, and he saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You do what you need to do. Teach your students, make a life in town if that is what you want. But know that my door is always open to you. Come out to the ranch whenever you like. Stay as long as you want. Nothing has to be decided today." She nodded, looking relieved, and gave his hand a quick squeeze before following Tucker into the schoolhouse. Quinn waited outside, giving her time to see her new workplace and meet the children who would be her students. When she emerged an hour later, her eyes were bright with excitement. 23 students," she said as Quinn helped her back into the wagon. "Ranging from 6 years old to 14. Some of them can barely read, but they are all eager to learn. Oh, Quinn, I think I am going to love this." "I am glad," he said honestly. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a pattern. Willa taught school during the week, boarding in the small room attached to the schoolhouse. On Friday evenings, Quinn would drive into town and collect her, and she would spend the weekends at the ranch. They would work side by side during the day, her helping with the lighter chores while he tended to the cattle and repaired fences. In the evenings, they would talk and laugh and slowly, carefully, explore the growing feelings between them. Quinn courted her the old-fashioned way, with respect and patience. He brought her wildflowers picked from the meadows on his land. He taught her to ride his gentlest horse so they could explore the countryside together. He read to her from the books of poetry he kept hidden away, revealing a softer side he rarely showed anyone. And Willa bloomed under his attention, becoming more confident and radiant with each passing week. Their first kiss happened on a cool October evening, 2 months after she had started teaching. They had been walking along the creek that bordered Quinn's property, talking about everything and nothing, when Willa suddenly stopped and turned to face him. "Quinn Forrester," she said, a hint of exasperation in her voice, "you have been a perfect gentleman for 2 months now, and while I appreciate your respect, I am starting to think you are never going to kiss me." Quinn blinked, caught off guard. "I did not want to rush you. I did not want you to feel pressured." "I do not feel pressured," Willa said, stepping closer. "I feel impatient. So unless you do not actually want to kiss me, I suggest you stop being quite so much of a gentleman." Quinn laughed, a sound of pure joy, and pulled her into his arms. "Yes, madam," he said, and then he kissed her. It was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and warm and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Willa rested her forehead against his chest and sighed happily. "That was worth waiting for." "I have been wanting to do that since the day you woke up and smiled at me," Quinn admitted. "Then why did you wait so long?" "Because I wanted to do this right. I wanted you to be sure." He tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "Willa, I love you. I think I started loving you that first day when you looked at me with those green eyes and trusted me to save you. I know it is fast. I know we should probably wait longer, but I cannot help how I feel." Tears spilled down Willa's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I did not know it was possible to feel this way about someone, to feel this safe and cherished and understood. When I am with you, I feel like I have finally come home." They stood there by the creek as the sun set, holding each other and making quiet promises about the future. That night after they returned to the cabin, Quinn formally asked Willa to marry him. He did not have a ring yet, and his proposal was simple and unadorned, but it came from the heart. "Willa Langston, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise I will work every day to make you happy, to give you a good life, to be the man you deserve." "Yes," Willa said without hesitation. "Yes, Quinn, I will marry you." They were married in the Wyatt Church on a bright November morning in 1878, with half the town in attendance. Willa wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Quinn wore his best suit, his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. Pete stood as Quinn's best man, and the schoolmaster's wife stood up with Willa. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with such tender devotion that several ladies in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. The townspeople threw them a reception in the church hall, with food and music and dancing. Quinn, who had always been reserved and solitary, found himself smiling until his face hurt, accepting congratulations from people who had known him for years, but had never seen him so happy. Willa glowed beside him, laughing and chatting with her students and their parents, clearly beloved already by the community she had joined. As the evening wound down and they prepared to drive back to the ranch, now truly their ranch, their shared home, Willa pulled Quinn aside. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For finding me, for saving me, for giving me a life I never dreamed I could have." She took his face in her hands. "I was dying on that trail, Quinn, not just from the bullet wound, but from loneliness and despair. I thought my life would be nothing but work and struggle and solitude. And then you appeared and everything changed." "You saved me too," Quinn said, covering her hands with his. "I did not even know how empty my life was until you filled it. You make everything brighter, Willa. You make me want to be better." They drove home under a sky full of stars, Willa nestled against Quinn's side, both of them too happy for many words. The cabin glowed with lamplight as they approached, and Pete had tactfully made himself scarce for the night, staying in town at the boarding house. It was just the two of them, husband and wife, beginning their life together. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Quinn's life. Willa continued teaching during the week, and Quinn continued running the ranch, but every moment they spent together felt precious. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small intimacies of married life. Willa learned that Quinn was an early riser who liked his coffee strong and black, that he had nightmares sometimes about the war but would not talk about them, that he had a dry sense of humor that came out when he was relaxed and happy. Quinn learned that Willa sang to herself when she was cooking, that she read everything she could get her hands on, that she had a fierce protective streak when it came to her students, and would fight anyone who tried to harm them. They worked together to improve the ranch, adding a room to the cabin that would serve as Willa's study, where she could prepare lessons and grade papers. Quinn built her a bookshelf that covered one entire wall, and slowly they filled it with volumes ordered from catalogs and purchased on trips to Kansas City. They talked about the future, about eventually expanding the herd, about maybe hiring more help so Quinn would not have to work quite so hard. In the spring of 1879, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but waited until she was certain before telling Quinn. She chose a Sunday afternoon when they were sitting on the porch, enjoying the warm breeze and watching the cattle graze in the distance. "Quinn, I have something to tell you," she said, reaching for his hand. He turned to her, immediately attentive to the serious note in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine." She smiled, a mix of joy and nervousness. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Quinn just stared at her as if he could not quite process the words. Then a grin spread across his face, wide and genuine and full of wonder. "A baby? Willa, are you sure?" "I am sure. Dr. Morrison confirmed it yesterday when I went into town. The baby should come in October." Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "This is the best news I have ever received. You have made me the happiest man alive." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Are you happy about it? I know we have not been married very long." "I am thrilled," Willa said honestly. "I admit I am a little scared, but mostly I am excited. We are going to be parents, Quinn. We are going to have a family." The pregnancy was not easy. Willa suffered from severe morning sickness in the first few months, and Quinn hovered over her with such anxious concern that she finally had to gently tell him to give her some space to breathe. She taught school through the end of the spring term, then reluctantly resigned for the next year, knowing she would need to focus on the baby. The school board hired a temporary replacement, but made it clear they hoped Willa would return eventually. As summer arrived and Willa's belly grew round with their child, Quinn found himself simultaneously terrified and elated. He had never thought much about being a father, had never really imagined himself as a family man. But now, watching Willa rest her hand on her stomach and smile at the baby's kicks, he could not imagine anything he wanted more. He threw himself into preparing for the baby's arrival with the same determination he brought to everything else. He built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk so there would be no chance of splinters. He rode into Kansas City and bought fabric for baby clothes, blankets, and diapers, enduring the knowing smiles of the shop ladies. He read every book on childbirth and infant care he could find, determined to be prepared for anything. Willa watched his preparations with amused affection. You know, women have been having babies for thousands of years without their husbands building furniture and reading medical texts. She teased one evening as Quinn pored over a particularly dense volume about infant ailments. "I know," Quinn said, not looking up, "but this is my baby. I want to do everything right." "You will be a wonderful father," Willa said softly. "You do not need to be perfect. You just need to be yourself, kind and patient and loving. That is all any child needs." The baby came early on a September evening when the air was still thick with summer heat. Willa's labor started just after supper, and Quinn immediately sent Pete riding for Dr. Morrison. The hours that followed were the longest of Quinn's life. He held Willa's hand as the contractions intensified, feeling utterly helpless in the face of her pain. She was strong and brave, gritting her teeth and breathing through the worst of it, but he could see the fear in her eyes and wished desperately he could take it from her. Dr. Morrison arrived near midnight and took charge with calm efficiency. He examined Willa, declared everything was progressing normally, and settled in to wait. Quinn stayed at Willa's side through the whole ordeal, ignoring the doctor's suggestion that he might be more comfortable waiting outside. He had promised to be there for her in sickness and health, and he was not about to leave now. Their son was born just before dawn, arriving with a lusty cry that filled the cabin. Dr. Morrison cleaned him up and placed him in Willa's arms, and Quinn felt his heart expand with an emotion so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. He was perfect. "He is beautiful," Willa whispered, exhausted but radiant. "Look at him, Quinn. We made this." Quinn could not speak past the lump in his throat. He reached out and touched his son's tiny hand, marveling when the baby's fingers curled around his thumb with surprising strength. "He is perfect," he finally managed. "You are perfect. Thank you, Willa. Thank you for this." They named him Wyatt Thomas Forrester, after the town where Willa had been heading when fate intervened and Quinn's father who had died during the war. Wyatt was a good baby, healthy and strong-lunged, and he fit into their lives as if he had always been there. Quinn discovered that fatherhood suited him. He loved the weight of his son in his arms, the baby smell of milk and soap, the way Wyatt would stop crying when Quinn walked him around the cabin at night. He loved watching Willa nurse their child, the Madonna-like peace on her face as she gazed down at their son. The first year of Wyatt's life flew by in a blur of sleepless nights and first smiles, first teeth, and first words. Willa returned to teaching part-time when Wyatt was 6 months old, bringing him with her to school and letting the older girls help watch him when she was busy with lessons. The students adored him, and Wyatt seemed to thrive on the attention. Quinn expanded the ranch during this time, buying more land and increasing the herd. The work was hard, but he had help now. Pete had been joined by 2 younger ranch hands, and together they managed the daily operations efficiently. Quinn was building something that would last, a legacy he could pass on to his son and any other children he and Willa might have. They talked about more children often. Willa wanted a daughter, she said, someone she could teach to sew and read and be strong in a world that often was not kind to women. Quinn said he would be happy with whatever came, though privately he admitted he would like Wyatt to have a sibling. He had been an only child, and it had been lonely sometimes. Their daughter arrived in the spring of 1882, 3 years after Wyatt's birth. This time the labor was shorter, and Quinn was better prepared, though no less anxious. Lily Rose Forrester came into the world with less fanfare than her brother, a quiet baby with Willa's green eyes and Quinn's dark hair. She was tiny and delicate, and Quinn was terrified to hold her at first, afraid his rough hands would somehow hurt her. But Willa laughed and placed the baby in his arms, and Lily looked up at him with such trust that all his fear melted away. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your daddy. I am going to take care of you and love you and keep you safe. Always." Wyatt, who was not quite 3, was fascinated by his new sister. He wanted to help with everything, from changing diapers to rocking her cradle. Quinn and Willa supervised carefully, but let him be involved, wanting him to feel included rather than displaced. The 4 of them became a tight unit, the Forrester family, facing the world together. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the county. Quinn hired more hands and built a proper bunkhouse for them. He and Willa added another room to the cabin, then another, until it was less a cabin and more a proper house. They added a front parlor with store-bought furniture, a dining room with a table big enough for the growing family, and upstairs bedrooms for the children. Willa continued teaching, beloved by her students and respected by the community. She started a lending library in the schoolhouse, using books donated by families in town and ordering more with funds from church fundraisers. She taught Sunday school and organized charity drives for families in need. She became a pillar of the community, and Quinn was endlessly proud of her. Wyatt and Lily grew up surrounded by love and wide open spaces. Wyatt was a natural rancher, following his father everywhere from the time he could walk, learning about cattle and horses and the land. Lily was more like her mother, bookish and thoughtful, though she could ride as well as any boy and was not afraid of hard work. Quinn taught them both to shoot, to track, to survive in the wilderness. Willa taught them to read and write, to think critically, to question injustice. In 1885, when Wyatt was 6 and Lily was 3, Willa surprised Quinn with the news that another baby was on the way. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, and Dr. Morrison urged caution. Willa was 30 years old now, not old by any means, but not as young as she had been. She tired easily and suffered from dizzy spells. Quinn insisted she give up teaching for a while and rest as much as possible. Their second son was born in January 1886, during the coldest winter Missouri had seen in years. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Quinn feared he might lose both Willa and the baby. But Dr. Morrison knew his business, and both mother and child came through, though it took Willa weeks to fully recover. They named him Peter Forrester after Pete, the faithful ranch hand who had become like family. Young Peter was a robust baby, larger at birth than either of his siblings had been, with his mother's green eyes and a sunny disposition that made everyone smile. Pete the elder was so moved by the honor that he wept openly, and Quinn and Willa were both touched by his emotion. With 3 children now, the house was full of noise and life and love. Quinn could hardly remember what his life had been like before Willa, before the children. Those solitary years seemed like they belonged to someone else, a different man living a different life. He was 40 years old now, with gray starting to show at his temples, but he felt younger than he had in his 20s. Love had done that. Family had done that. One evening in the summer of 1887, Quinn and Willa sat on their porch as they often did after the children were in bed. The ranch stretched out before them, bathed in the golden light of sunset. They could hear Pete and the hands finishing up the day's work, the lowing of cattle settling for the night, the chirp of crickets beginning their evening song. "You ever think about that day?" Willa asked quietly. "The day you found me, all the time," Quinn admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding a different route that day to never finding you. It terrifies me, thinking about how easily we might have missed each other." "I think about it too," Willa said. "I think about those men shooting me, about crawling into those trees convinced I was going to die alone. And then I think about opening my eyes and seeing your face, seeing concern and determination, and knowing somehow that I was going to be all right." She reached for his hand. "You saved my life that day, Quinn, but you have kept saving it every day since. You have given me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know to want. A home, a family, purpose, love. So much love." "You saved me too," Quinn said, squeezing her hand. "I was alive, but I was not really living. Just going through the motions, day after day, year after year. You taught me what it meant to truly live, to open my heart, to let someone in. You gave me a reason to be better, to do better. Everything good in my life has come from you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands linked, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear one of the children stirring, probably Lily having one of her frequent dreams. Willa started to rise, but Quinn stopped her. "I will go," he said. "You rest." He found Lily sitting up in bed, her dark hair tousled and her green eyes wide. "Daddy, I had a scary dream." "Come here, little one," Quinn said, sitting on the edge of her bed and pulling her into his arms. "Tell me about it." "I dreamed that you and Mama went away and never came back," Lily said, her voice trembling. "And Wyatt and Peter and me were all alone." "That is never going to happen," Quinn said firmly, holding her close. "Your Mama and I are not going anywhere. We are going to be here, taking care of you and your brothers for a very long time." "Promise?" Lily asked. "I promise," Quinn said. "You are stuck with us, I am afraid." Lily giggled at that, the fear fading from her eyes. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart." "More than all the stars in the sky." He tucked her back into bed, smoothing the blankets around her. "Now you go back to sleep. Tomorrow is a new day, and we have a full life to live." He returned to the porch where Willa was waiting. She looked up at him with a question in her eyes, and he smiled. "Bad dream. She is fine now." "You are wonderful with them," Willa said. "I could not ask for a better father for my children." "Our children," Quinn corrected. "And I am just trying to do right by them. They deserve the best we can give them." As the years continued to pass, the Forrester family became a fixture in Wyatt and the surrounding countryside. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, and Quinn's reputation as an honest dealer and good employer meant he had his pick of ranch hands. Wyatt the younger showed every sign of becoming a fine rancher himself, learning the business from the ground up under his father's patient tutelage. Lily developed her mother's passion for teaching and announced at 10 years old that she wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. Peter, the youngest, was still figuring out what he wanted, but he had a gift with animals and an easy charm that made everyone like him. Willa returned to teaching when Peter started school, and she and Lily would often prepare lessons together in the evenings. Quinn loved watching them, their heads bent over books, discussing literature and history and mathematics. He had never been much of a scholar himself, but he made sure his children had every educational opportunity he could provide. In 1892, tragedy struck when old Pete died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74. He had been slowing down for years, spending more time sitting in the sun and telling stories than working cattle, but his death still hit the family hard. Pete had been there from the beginning, had helped Quinn build the ranch, had been a witness to Quinn and Willa's courtship and marriage, had been honorary grandfather to their children. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, under an oak tree where he had liked to sit and smoke his pipe. At the funeral, Quinn spoke about what Pete had meant to him. He was more than a ranch hand. He was a friend, a mentor, a member of our family. He taught me that family is not always blood. Sometimes it is the people who choose to stand by you, who work beside you, who share your joys and your sorrows. Pete chose us, and we were better for it. The children took Pete's death hard, especially young Peter, who had been named after him. But the family pulled together, supporting each other through the grief, and eventually the pain faded to a bittersweet memory of a good man well loved. Life moved on, as it always does. Wyatt the Younger turned 18 in 1897 and began taking on more responsibility at the ranch. He was a good worker, strong and reliable, with his father's integrity and his mother's intelligence. Quinn knew the ranch would be in good hands when he eventually retired. Lily, at 15, was already helping her mother teach the younger students at the school and making plans to attend a teaching college in Kansas City. Peter, at 11, was still all boyish energy and mischief, but with a good heart underneath. Quinn was 50 years old now, his hair more gray than dark, his body bearing the wear of decades of hard physical labor. But he was content in a way he had never imagined possible. He had a wife who still made his heart race when she smiled at him, children who made him proud, a ranch that was thriving, and a place in a community that respected him. He had built a good life from nothing, and it was all because of a choice he had made on a dusty trail 19 years earlier, to stop and help a dying woman. One evening in the fall of 1897, Quinn and Willa took a rare moment to themselves and rode out to the creek where they had shared their first kiss all those years ago. The trees were turning gold and red, and the air had the crisp coolness of autumn. They dismounted and stood by the water, watching it flow over the rocks. "We have come a long way from that first day," Willa said, leaning against Quinn's shoulder. "Do you remember how scared I was? How uncertain?" "I remember," Quinn said. "I was scared too, though I tried not to show it. Scared you would die, scared you would leave once you recovered, scared I would not be enough to make you want to stay." "You were always enough," Willa said. "More than enough. You gave me a life I treasure, Quinn. Every single day, I wake up grateful that you found me, that you chose me, that you loved me." "It was the easiest choice I ever made," Quinn said. "Loving you has been the simplest, most natural thing in the world." They stood together as the sun set, comfortable in each other's presence after 19 years of marriage. They had weathered hardships and celebrated triumphs. They had raised 3 children and built a legacy that would outlast them. They had loved each other through everything, and that love had never wavered. In the years that followed, the Forrester family continued to grow and evolve. Wyatt married a smart young woman named Sarah from a neighboring ranch in 1900, and they gave Quinn and Willa their first grandchild, a boy named Quinn Jr., in 1901. Lily went off to teaching college as planned, and returned 2 years later with a teaching certificate and a quiet young man named James who had been her classmate. They married in 1903 and took positions together at a school in Springfield, Missouri. Peter, the youngest, surprised everyone by announcing he wanted to be a veterinarian. Quinn and Willa scraped together the money to send him to veterinary school in Kansas City, and he graduated with honors in 1907. Quinn retired from active ranching in 1905, turning the day-to-day operations over to Wyatt Jr., and a capable foreman they had hired. He and Willa spent their days reading, gardening, playing with their growing number of grandchildren, and enjoying the peace of old age. Willa finally gave up teaching in 1908 at the age of 53, though she continued to tutor students privately and manage the lending library she had started. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1908 with a party that brought together the whole community. Their children and grandchildren filled the house, and neighbors and friends came from miles around to honor the couple who had become such a beloved part of the community. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and enough food to feed an army. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Quinn found himself standing on the porch with Willa, watching the sunset just as they had done thousands of times before. 30 years, he said wonderingly. It does not seem possible. The best 30 years of my life, Willa said. She was 53 now, her dark hair liberally streaked with gray, lines of age and laughter marking her face. But to Quinn, she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her truly awake, looking at him with those green eyes full of trust and hope. Thank you for every moment, Quinn. For every day of love and laughter and life. Thank you, Quinn said, for saying yes when I asked you to stay, for building this life with me, for being my partner in everything. They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, two people who had found each other against all odds and created something beautiful together. Around them, their children and grandchildren moved through the house, the sound of family and love filling the air. Quinn Forrester lived to be 71 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1918 with Willa holding his hand. He had lived to see his grandchildren grow, to watch Peter establish a successful veterinary practice in Wyatt, to know that the ranch would continue for generations. His last words to Willa were, "Thank you for the best life a man could ask for. I love you. I will love you forever." Willa lived another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and engaged with the world until the very end. She passed away in 1926 at the age of 71, in the house Quinn had built for her, in the bed they had shared for 48 years. Her last words, spoken to Lily, who was holding her hand, were, "Tell your father I am coming. Tell him to wait for me." They were buried side by side on the hill next to Old Pete, under a large oak tree that had grown from an acorn, planted the year of their marriage. The headstone was simple, Quinn Forrester. 1847-1918, beloved husband, father, grandfather Willa Forrester. 1855-1926, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher together forever. The Forrester Ranch continued to operate for another century, passed down through the generations, a testament to what Quinn and Willa had built together. The story of how they met, how Quinn had found Willa bleeding and barely conscious on the trail and had saved her life, became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. It became a story about fate and choice, about compassion and courage, about how a single moment of kindness can change everything. But more than that, it was a story about love, about the kind of love that endures through hardship and grows stronger with time. About partnership and respect, about building something together that is greater than what either person could create alone. About the choice to stay, to commit, to love through everything. Quinn and Willa's descendants would eventually scatter across the country, pursuing different dreams and different lives. But they all carried with them the legacy of that love story, the knowledge that they came from people who had loved deeply and well, who had faced the challenges of frontier life with courage and grace, who had built a family and a community through sheer determination and love. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the house was settling into stillness, you could almost feel their presence on that old porch, two souls who had found each other against all odds and had spent a lifetime grateful for that finding. The house might be empty now, preserved as a historic landmark, but love like theirs leaves echoes, imprints on the land and the air and the hearts of those who come after. It all started with blood on a dusty trail, with a dying woman and a cowboy who chose to stop, to help, to care. It grew into something beautiful and lasting, proof that even in the harsh world of the frontier, even in a time and place known for violence and hardship, love could flourish. Quinn and Willa had found each other in the wilderness, and together they had created a home, a family, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their love story was not dramatic or full of grand gestures. It was built on quiet moments and daily choices, on showing up for each other day after day, year after year. It was built on respect and laughter, on shared work and shared dreams. It was the kind of love that most people hope for, but not everyone finds. The kind that transforms ordinary lives into something extraordinary. And it all began with compassion, with one man seeing someone in need and choosing to help rather than ride on by. That choice changed 2 lives, created 3 more, and rippled outward to touch hundreds of people across multiple generations. It was proof that kindness matters, that one person can make a difference, that love is worth fighting for. The Forrester legacy lived on in the children and grandchildren who inherited Quinn's integrity and Willa's compassion. It lived on in the ranch that still bore their name, in the school where Willa had taught generations of students, in the town of Wyatt that had been their home. But most of all, it lived on in the hearts of those who knew their story and understood that true love, the kind that lasts a lifetime, is built not on passion alone but on choice, commitment, and the daily decision to stand by the person you love through everything life brings. Quinn and Willa Forrester had lived and loved and built something beautiful together. They had taken a moment of violence and tragedy and transformed it into a beginning, a chance for both of them to find what they had been missing. They had seized that chance with both hands and never let go, and in doing so, they had created something that would outlast them by generations. Their story was one of the Old West, of a time when life was hard and uncertain, when survival took everything you had. But it was also a timeless story because love itself is timeless. The particulars might change, the setting might shift, but the fundamental truth remains the same. Love transforms us. Love saves us. Love gives meaning to all the struggle and hardship. Quinn had been a lonely cowboy, going through the motions of life without truly living. Willa had been a desperate young woman, wounded and dying on a dusty trail. Together they had become something more, something greater. They had become partners, lovers, parents, pillars of their community. They had become proof that even in the hardest circumstances, with the odds stacked against you, love can flourish if you nurture it, protect it, and never take it for granted. And so their story ended where it began, with a trail winding through the Missouri countryside, with blood and dust and the unforgiving sun. But it also ended with love, with family, with a legacy that would endure. Quinn Forrester had stopped to help a dying woman on a trail in 1878, and that choice had defined the rest of his life. It had brought him everything that mattered, everything that made life worth living. He had bandaged her wounds and stayed close, just as the story said. But he had done more than that. He had given her his heart, his loyalty, his devotion. He had chosen her every day for 40 years, and she had chosen him right back. They had built a life together on that foundation of mutual choice and commitment, and it had been more than either of them could have imagined. In the end, that is what love is. Not the dramatic rescue or the passionate declaration, though those have their place. Real love is the daily choice to stay, to support, to cherish. It is the bandaging of wounds, both physical and emotional. It is staying close through good times and bad, through youth and age, through everything life brings. Quinn and Willa had understood that, had lived it every day of their marriage. And because they did, their love story became the kind that people tell their children and grandchildren, the kind that inspires and uplifts, the kind that reminds us all what is possible when two people commit to loving each other well. The trail where Quinn found Willa still exists, though it is paved now and called something different. The cottonwood grove where she lay bleeding is part of a park. The ranch house is a museum. But the story lives on, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the enduring nature of true love. They were just two people, a cowboy and a teacher, who found each other in the wilderness of the Old West. But together, they created something that would last forever. Their love story had a beginning on that blood-stained trail in 1878, but it has no real ending. It lives on in their descendants, in the land they loved, in the community they helped build, and in the hearts of everyone who hears their story and understands that love, real love, is the most powerful force in the world. Quinn Forrester stopped to help a dying woman, and in doing so, he found his reason for living. Willa Langston opened her eyes to see a stranger's face, and in doing so, she found her home. Together, they proved that even in the harsh reality of frontier life, love can bloom and thrive and create something beautiful that lasts far beyond a single lifetime. Their story is complete now, fully told, from the bloody beginning to the peaceful ending. It is a story of the American West, of hardship and perseverance, of building something from nothing. But more than that, it is a love story, pure and simple. It is the story of two people who found each other when they needed it most, who chose each other every day, and who created a legacy of love that would endure for generations. And if you visit that old ranch house in Missouri, now carefully preserved as it was in their time, you might feel it still. The love that filled those rooms, the laughter that echoed through that house, the commitment and devotion that built a family and a future. Quinn and Willa Forrester may be gone, but what they created together lives on, a testament to the transformative power of love and the importance of choosing to help, to care, to stay close even when it would be easier to ride on by. Their happily ever after was not perfect or without challenges. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was built on the strongest foundation of all. A cowboy who stopped to help a dying woman, who bandaged her wounds and stayed close, who gave her his heart and his life. A woman who trusted a stranger with her life and her future, who chose to stay when she could have left, who loved with her whole heart for 48 years. Together, they wrote a love story for the ages, one that deserves to be remembered and celebrated as an example of what love can be when two people commit to it fully. This is their story, complete and whole, a tale of the Wild West and timeless love, of blood and bandages and the choice to stay close. It is a story with a beginning, a middle and an ending, all the threads resolved, all the promises kept. Quinn and Willa Forrester lived and loved and left behind something beautiful. Their story is told, their legacy secure, their love eternal.